from WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm Josh Manning, Deputy Managing Editor for Assignment here at the Western Journal. Joining me today, Joey Chester, Assignment Editor. On my left, Andrew Shasha. Are you a features editor
Who knows
now?
what he does anymore?
He's been promoted multiple times very quickly, despite our better
Which is
judgment.
dangerous for the
Despite our
ego.
better judgment. But he heads up our feature story division. And we're glad to be with you today. We thank you for tuning in and watching. We've got some great content for you today. Going to be bringing you three topics. First off, we're going to want to talk with you about some video that Project Veritas rolled out. James O'Keefe and his crew. They essentially set a honeypot trap and got some very interesting inside information from some CNN insiders. We're also going to talk about socialized healthcare, and not the way you think. We're talking reparations healthcare. We're talking about healthcare that prioritizes one race over another. And then we're going to also be talking about Joe Biden and his changes to the mission in Afghanistan, when we're going to pull out. Are we going to pull out? What's going to happen there? But first off, we want to start off with Joey and Project Veritas. Joey, tell us what's happening.
Project Veritas, I think, has confirmed something that we have thought for a long time, and that is that the mainstream media is just filled with activists who have a political agenda, and they are essentially arms of political candidates and campaigns. So Project Veritas went undercover with a director of something at CNN and uncovered some pretty alarming things. They're going to be two things, and they're related to the 2020 election, Donald Trump, and the coronavirus pandemic. And before I get into it, I just want to play a short clip so everyone can get an idea of what Project Veritas uncovered.
I think we got him through this term. We would always show shots of him jogging, him in aviator shades, and like you paint him as a young geriatric.
We were creating a story there that we didn't know anything about. You know, we were. So that's. I think that's propaganda.
Look what we did. We got Trump back. I am 100% going to say it, and I 100% believe it. That if it wasn't for CNN, I don't know that Trump would have got voted out or focused.
It's pretty shocking things there. CNN is admitting essentially that they were campaigning for Joe Biden to get Donald Trump out. So there is no sense of non-biased news here. It is all radically biased with an agenda. One of those things was do you guys remember the video of Trump walking down the steps at was it the military?
Yeah, the
graduation?
ramp.
Yes.
Talked
The
about it a
ramp,
few weeks ago on the show.
Yes. So this guy says Trump's hand was shaking or whatever. We brought in like so many medical people to tell a story that like it was all speculation, that he was neurologically damaged and he was losing it. So they brought in selective medical experts to report on Donald Trump's health to try to sow doubt in Trump to get Biden elected. I mean, imagine if Fox News had brought on a bunch of medical experts to diagnose Joe Biden with dementia before the 2020 election. That would be problematic, don't you think?
Well, I don't remember Fox bringing on a whole bunch of medical experts about Hillary. Maybe there were some.
Right.
I don't remember that. But man, there was so much caterwauling from the left and from the media about any kind of speculation about Hillary's health.
Yeah.
How dare they do? And Hillary just provided, she's kind of like Biden, she provided all of these fantastic opportunities. Do you guys remember the
Couldn't
clip
open
of
the
them?
pickle jar.
Couldn't open it. They were loading her. Looked like they were loading her into an ambulance in one shot. She provided all of these opportunities, and so I don't remember conservatives marching out a whole bunch of doctors. Possible they did. But yeah, assembling a bunch of doctors to completely speculate, and that's not what the news is supposed to do. The news is supposed to ask hard questions to people who are in power and keep them accountable, and that's not what any of this was.
The thing that's shocking is this isn't even like biased news. It's beyond just biased news. Look, we admit that we're a conservative Christian news organization. Right. We tell people that up front so they know what they're getting. it's not like CNN is telling people, "Oh, yeah, we're campaigning for Joe Biden," just so you know. Isn't there some sort of potential trouble they could get in here? If you're a business or a media organization, and he's essentially admitting that CNN is actively campaigning or campaigned for Joe Biden. Can't they face some sort of consequences for what they did if he is really admitting that CNN campaigned for Joe Biden?
I mean, I don't think that there are any sort of specific institutional kind of ramifications or consequences to this. I don't think there should be. I think that the consequences that should be struck here, and I'm hoping that the American people are catching on to it, is the idea that, and this is something that a media idol of mine, Andrew Breitbart, said throughout the later part of his life, was that the left uses nonpartisanship and all of these words of moderacy and centricism as a cudgel against the American people and against their enemies. They claim this nonpartisan, unbiased view of things that they don't actually have, and then they go behind everyone's backs while the veil is up, and they start walloping the opposition with a hammer. And so I don't really see a problem with them doing that. I mean, folks on the right do the same thing to folks on the left. Now, depending on how you view journalism and media, that might be a problem for you. For a very long time, if you look back at the history of journalism in this country and in Western Europe, journalism has never really been an idea of this kind of unbiased approach. Yellow journalism is a fantastic example. The breaking down of Tammany Hall in New York, even the early publications in the United States during the Revolution were all ideologically driven. The problem is when you start claiming that you are not, in fact, ideologically driven. So when it comes to consequences, Joy, I'm hoping that it is that the American people wake up and as an audience provide consequences to CNN and MSNBC for not admitting their bias, for operating as though they were an unbiased organization and then beating the opposition like a campaign arm. I don't see a problem with fighting the fight ideologically as long as you come clean about where your ideology is.
Well, I think I agree with that. And that's been happening to some extent, right? Because when you look at the ratings, Fox for forever has absolutely cleaned CNN's clock and MSNBC's clock and frequently done them at the same time. Fox has had better ratings than the other two combined. So there is some amount of a market play involved here, and audiences kind of deciding where they want to go. It is alarming, though, that a group claiming to be unbiased that controls multiple news networks and is a source for an unbelievable number of stories per day, news stories, is out there essentially saying, hey, look, had it not been for us, I'm not sure we would have gotten Trump out of there. And I think he said we would have gotten Trump out of there. So it's a... I loved the movie Patton, and in the movie Patton, George C. Scott is complaining about General Montgomery, and he says, look, everybody calls me a prima donna, and I know I'm a prima donna. My problem with Monty is he's a prima donna, and he won't admit he's a prima donna. And that's it. It's like we admit our bias in these things. And another thing that kind of popped into my head as we were talking about this, in the old days, you talk about yellow journalism, you talk about years ago, at least there was a reasonable amount of agreement about what America is and that America should persist and that the experiment was a good thing and a net positive to the world. And so, you might see it from different angles and you might think different policies were more important, but at least the people in the media did think that America was actually a good thing. And it's not at all clear that that's the case now. In fact, I think there's probably a good case to be made that that's not the case, that the vast majority of the legacy media and the mainstream media don't think America's a good thing. And when you look at the 1619 garbage, they don't think we were a good thing from the beginning.
And to get back at the point that you made at the beginning of that, Josh, it's the idea that, this ideology and this kind of their coverage of everything, it is used as a source for multiple, major news narratives and stories,
They set the narrative,
which
yeah.
becomes more of a problem when they are trotting out anonymous sources like we have seen them do
Yes.
over the last 4 years. If you are not disclosing your bias, if you are attempting to operate as a campaign arm, all of your sources now can no longer be trusted when it comes to things that you hold behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Why should we trust anything else that you hold behind the curtain? How should we trust that Donald Trump said X about veterans while he was at a cemetery, a national cemetery in France? Why should we trust any of these stories when it's become clear that behind the curtain you are manipulating the narrative?
Yeah, and then you get them up in front of Adam Schiff and his trained monkeys, and it turns out nobody actually said what was supposedly said, and
Yep.
nobody was in the room when this damning thing was said. And that it ultimately was all made. And look, the New York Times, the Insider, remember the Insider full page.
Anonymous.
The
Yes,
anonymous
anonymous.
thing. And it was just a highly placed official in the Trump
nobody.
administration
no one.
who's turned on. It's like this double secret undersecretary of nothingness.
DHS,
I can't
yeah,
remember what it
nobody.
was. Yeah. I think the guy had like 2 mentions on the entire internet. It would be laughable if it weren't so dangerous. And that's what this is. This is unbelievably dangerous. Go ahead.
I would say, speaking of that danger, there's another part of this. We don't have the video from it, but this producer also admitted that CNN's coverage of COVID was entirely political to stir fear into the American public over the pandemic. The reason they had that death counter up there all the time was to scare people. And when the numbers weren't high enough, they didn't like it. And if the numbers weren't high enough, sometimes they wouldn't include it because it didn't bring enough fear into American households. And so I think you completely discredit yourself as a news organization if you only show that type of information when it benefits you politically. And think about how that helped Joe Biden. If you showed how terrible the pandemic was, how terrible Trump was combined, it makes sense that helped Trump lose the election.
Yeah, I think everybody agreed in January of 2020.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is Trump sailing in.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
no
No
problems
doubt.
at all.
No
the economy's on fire.
Yeah.
I mean, Democrats are just going to get shellacked. And then some rumbling in February,
Yeah.
and then real rumbling in March, and then they began to see their opportunity. And man, they did use it. And you're right. And that's not presenting the news. When you show numbers when they're beneficial to your narrative, but don't show them when they're not beneficial to your narrative, that's not fully covering the news. Now, again, CNN wants to do that. That's fine, but they need to admit that's what they're doing. And it
Yes.
is a strange thing to me. It's a damning thing to me that it takes a honey trap to bring this out.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Like Fox, I always feel like does a really good job separating their commentators versus their news reporters. And when Fox reports news during the day, it's pretty accurate. People like Brett Baer, they're pretty just straight down the middle. CNN does not do a good job about that. They do not tell you what's commentary and opinion versus what's news. And I think it's disastrous for them. And this looks incredibly bad. Speaking of COVID, a lot of people have been in hospitals across the nation this year.
Yes.
Now, if you're in a hospital in what state, Josh?
Massachusetts.
Well, this is
might-
up in Andrew's
You might run
home
into
state.
some problems if you're white.
My neck of the woods.
Yes. So the Western Journal is producing a piece on this right now, or we're producing it today. I don't think it's live yet, though. So I'm going to read to you a little bit from an Examiner piece on this. And you'll bear with me if I read just a little bit. A Boston hospital says it will offer, quote, preferential care based on race and race-explicit interventions in an attempt to engage in an anti-racist agenda for medicine. And of course, that's based on critical race theory. This is coming out of Brigham Women's Hospital. Now, the hospital itself, when asked about this, was pretty quick to respond. They told the Examiner in a statement that this idea is from an opinion piece written by 2 physicians and is not a formal position of the hospital. The Brigham is committed to examining and eliminating the many impacts that racism has on health and well-being of our patients. As part of this commitment, researchers have proposed a pilot program for heart failure patients that aims to address the racial inequities found in a recent study, which found that race, as well as other factors, affected who is admitted to cardiology service at the hospital. Aspects of this pilot program were described within the opinion piece you've cited. This program offers a critical step toward identifying opportunities to improve access for patients who have been historically denied equal access. Now, I think we are all for improving access to anyone. The more health care you can get in a reasonable fashion, the better. Free health care is actually not a good thing because it encourages overconsumption of it. Mm-hmm. But the right amount of health care, whatever economists say that is what we should be going for. But what these guys are talking about, what these authors were talking about, is actually using race to help determine who gets treatment when. And this can only, I was looking down through here, I was looking through the article before we went on the air, and of course we saw it was in Boston, which is Andrew's home state, and then I saw that there was at least one Harvard medical school professor involved in this. Bram Wispelwy and Michelle Morse. They're the ones who wrote the article originally. So the question is, all right, if we're going to base care on race, is that fair in the first place? I mean, aren't we just perpetuating a problem that they say exists? They say that there have been racial inequities. Aren't we just creating more racial inequities?
That's usually the solution the left uses for these issues. We have this issue that we think is racist, so we are going to take the races and divide them and give special treatment or care.
We'll flip them. We'll be racist to the other side.
Yes, we'll be racist to the other side. That's their solution for everything. We see it through things like affirmative action. And now this. They want to divide and conquer Americans, and that's exactly what this is. It's racism just flipped, I think.
And it's funny because we were just talking about, ideology and news, and I think that that's a place where there is an interplay in the discourse between politics and news and developments in Washington. All of these things kind of come to a head, and it makes sense that they kind of color one another. There are places where ideology has absolutely no place in American society, in any society. I forget who said it, but there's a famous quote about, when I go to the hospital and I'm worried I may have cancer, I don't ask the doctor, are you a Democrat or a Republican?
Exactly.
I shouldn't have to. I don't want that to be the way that we live in this country because I want this person to just take care of me because that is their job. When they start bringing ideology into, the person that serves my ice cream and the person that cures me of cancer and all of these things, we start to get into really dangerous territory because there are things that should be withdrawn from day-to-day ideology, things that matter more than politics. The only problem is that the left, and with, we talk about this all the time, the three of us off camera, the Marxists in the left, the way that they have kind of moved the Marxist ideology into American leftism and into the Democratic Party, these folks think that everything is a political issue and therefore ideology must color every conversation because it's the only way justice can be done.
This is no different. This is going to sound bad. So if I opened a restaurant and I said, this half of the restaurant, only black people can sit at. This half, only white people can sit at. Oh, and black people, you're going to be served first, and white people, you have to wait 20 minutes more just because of your race. I mean, it sounds so incredibly bad when you remove it from that situation and apply it to somewhere else. I think, Andrew, you're totally right. They have taken ideology and placed it into every aspect of life in places it shouldn't be. This is one of them.
It's kind of something you teach your kids when they're about 5, and that's that two wrongs don't make a right. Pardon me. Racism has existed in the past, and exclusion due to race has existed. Doing that again and just flipping the races doesn't help anybody. One thing it does help do, it helps fracture society. It helps create cleavages, which is what you were talking about a second ago. And if you want to splinter people, if you want to move toward tribalism, then absolutely. Absolutely. Tick off a bunch of people with racism and then flip it and tick off another group with racism so that they will resent each other endlessly.
And it just puts on full display the simplicity of their worldview. I mean, this is so smooth-brained it hurts. This idea that what we need is equilibrium. So if we've gone 5 clicks this way over the last however many centuries, let's just go 5 clicks the other way and we'll end up at 0. Yeah. That's not how it works in this system. That's not how it works in history and in the real world.
And especially, I mean, there's so many reasons why that's right. One is simply the lifespan of human beings. There's no person alive who was held in chattel slavery in the United States. There's no black person alive who was held in chattel slavery by a Confederate state alive now. It doesn't exist. And so you're righting a wrong that really can't be righted. I mean, these people, sadly, their day has passed, and there's no way to get justice for those people. And you're certainly not going to create justice for them by creating injustice for others. And then as I was reading this, I was thinking, there is one group of people who is 100% not going to be affected by whatever this policy is, and that is rich white people, which means poor white people. If this is effective, it will affect poor white people.
Yeah.
Which then means, yes, Democrats never really did care about the poor.
No.
That's not what they're interested in. And when you watch what they're doing with the transgender agenda, they never really cared about women.
Nope.
And if you watch what they're doing as far as family values go and school choice goes, they don't really care about the black family either.
They care about the vote.
So they care. That's it. They care about carving out little groups of votes and telling one group one thing about the other group and hoping that group never hears, and then hoping they all go to the polls in November and vote for them. It's a dangerous game to play, and I don't think it would work were we not as affluent as we are. But we are so affluent right now. Western society produces so much wealth and so many toys that it is easy to kind of overlook some of this. And so we're kind of victims of our own success.
And I hate to think of it in the purely political, ones and zeros sense that they look at it in, but this is actually, if what you're saying is accurate, if it comes to fruition that, this is just going to inhibit poor white people's health outcomes, they have essentially exacerbated the problem that created Donald Trump. The problem that created people like J.D. Vance as well, is this idea that the Democratic Party is so focused and intent on the wrongs of white people that they have completely isolated with their elitism the middle American white person.
And the wrongs that white people haven't committed. Who are these poor white people who are going to be declined service who have hurt black people? Who are these people? They don't exist. I was looking at an absolutely idiotic meme earlier today talking about what we white people have done to blacks, and I'm sitting there thinking, what we is this? I was not around. None of us were around. So it is and it's antithetical to Christianity too, the idea that forgiveness is a thing and that repentance can be a thing. All right, so we're running a little bit long. We have talked about some domestic stuff. Now let's talk international. Andrew, you've been keeping an eye on Afghanistan and what the president's doing there. Tell us about it.
I have indeed. So the perpetuating problems seem to be all over the American political system right now, domestic, foreign. It doesn't seem to matter. Americans love to perpetuate their own problems. And so, of course, over the course of the last 3 administrations, we have been abroad in Afghanistan and Iraq since September 11th. Horrible tragedy, coming up on the 20th year since September 11th attacks. And after 2 presidents in a row have claimed that they were going to withdraw us entirely from the nation of Afghanistan, we have gotten closer to that end goal. Much of that by the strategy of Donald Trump, and we are not there yet. President Obama came in guns blazing. He was ready to end the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. And in 2009, there was, of course, a major troop surge to the region because things had fallen completely out of disarray. Killed Osama bin Laden in 2012, and things got a little bit cooler and started to withdraw some troops. Of course, by 2016, then things had once again fallen out of favor, and they had greenlit some redeployments that President Donald Trump, despite campaigning on removing troops from the Middle East, had to kind of greenlight those redeployments.
We said we're going to crush ISIS, and
Yes,
then we're done.
and it happened, and then the withdrawals began, and they began much at the to the anguish of the war hawks in Washington, who fought all the way to ensure that the Afghan peace deal that came about last February didn't get seen to fruition in the first term. In the event that a new president took over and President Trump hadn't withdrawn all of our troops from Afghanistan. Unfortunately for those war hawks, Joe Biden has apparently decided that maybe he's going to do the right thing on this issue. Despite being all for further deployments under the Obama administration, he decided we will pull out of Afghanistan this year. Of course, he didn't want to do it right now because his advisors are advising against it. So the May 1st deadline has been pushed back. Those last 2,500 troops will remain for another 6 or so months until the 20th anniversary of September 11th, and then they will be withdrawn, all of them. Now, that sounds like a PR play, and if it sounds like a PR play to you, you're not alone at home. The veterans that we spoke to here at the Western Journal, we have a number of veteran sources here at the Western Journal, and all of the folks that we spoke to think that they were incredibly skeptical, first of all, of whether or not this will happen, given another delay and assurance that we'd be out by the end of this year. These folks said, I'm very skeptical on top of this about the deadline. The fact that September 11th, the 20th anniversary, it sounds like a PR move more than anything. And so that is what folks at the Bring Our Troops Home Foundation told us. A couple of multi-service veterans who fought in Afghanistan in some of the hottest regions in Afghanistan. Helmand, for instance, Ben Adams, who is now a state representative in Idaho, spoke to us. And he said, this is, I have completely no trust at this point for a political leader who tells me we're going to be out. When I was overseas, he told us 3 times we won the war in Afghanistan. That's a really depressing thought. And so what I essentially wanted to ask you guys first and foremost is just, is this going to happen? Do we really think that if we're going to say, we're going to delay it another 6 months, we're going to see what happens, but I assure you that this delay doesn't mean it's not going to happen, because it's going to happen, wink, wink, on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Is it going to happen, and how do we feel about the fact that we're going to delay it 6 months just for essentially a PR stunt on the anniversary of September 11th?
If I recall, I think I've seen this going around the past couple of days, Joe Biden said under the Obama administration that they were going to have troops out of Afghanistan by 2014. That never happened.
No.
And so he doesn't have a very good track record going into this in proving that troops are going to be taken out of Afghanistan. I don't believe it. I think so much with this administration feels like political theater and showmanship. Joe Biden was walking around Arlington Cemetery fully vaccinated today by himself with a mask on. There's so much political theater in this administration. And so delaying Trump's deadline, because how dare he give Trump the win and pull them out by his deadline, and delaying it to 9/11, it just feels so much like continued political theater. And there's a lot that can happen in that time. The way I look at it is there needs to be a short deadline because you don't know what can happen in those 6 months. I mean, say there's another issue overseas. Oh, we got to delay it by a year now. And it just feels like that happens time and time again versus just saying, nope, we're doing it now. They're coming home. That's it. This leaves so much time for something else to happen and more development. I don't believe it.
Remember the movie Mars Attacks? Do you remember that? It's a 96 movie. Jack Nicholson's in it and a bunch of other stars. And remember Martin Short plays the smarmy White House press guy, and Jack Nicholson's the president, and he says, well, how do we play this? I think his name was even Marty, maybe. Marty, how do we play this? And Marty said, oh, the people are going to love it. It's aliens. Right. Be nice. They're going to love it. It's just the best. And, then the aliens come in and just vaporize the entire Congress, which leads to Jack Nicholson saying, well, we still have the executive branch and the judicial branch, and 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I do feel like there's some kind of a PR hack in the White House saying, oh, yeah, anniversary of September 11th. That's it. The people will love it, Mr. President. The people will love it. Yeah. I think what you said, Joey, is probably right. I agree with the idea. If we're going to pull them out, let's go ahead and pull them out. I have long thought that the way to deal with this is to decrease ground forces, continue decapitation strikes when you've got the opportunity to whack the leaders of radical Islamist cults, you do it, and you do it with drones, or you do it with intelligence assets on the ground, and you get our boots off the ground and get these folks back home. It's a weird thing, man. Kids who are in college today, freshmen have been in college. We've been at war the entire time they've been there. That is definitely the exception in American history, not the norm.
There are now folks who were deployed to Afghanistan that were not alive at the time of 9/11. That is a deeply concerning idea. To get at Joey's point, when we spoke to Dan McKnight, the founder of Bring Our Troops Home, he spoke to us yesterday and he said, "Listen, these political moves have human consequences." When it came to Armistice Day in World War I, the Allied forces knew for 48 hours that the war was unofficially over before the ink was dry on the Armistice Day deal. And the fighting persisted. They did not tell their units on the Western Front that the war was over for 48 hours until the ink was dry, and it cost thousands of lives. So, at current rate, we have gone about 14 months now since an American has died in combat in Afghanistan. Now, that means that if things continue as they are, hopefully, God willing, no one dies in Afghanistan in this next year, none of our troops. That's not guaranteed. That's something that clearly isn't guaranteed, when you look at that World War I instance. What I do want to ask is, and I guess this question goes less for Donald Trump because when he took office, 14,000 troops in Afghanistan. Now 2,500 troops. Wow. If we're all wrong, if this does actually happen after 2 decades and Biden pulls this off, is it egg on the face of his predecessor, Barack Obama, who promised in 2008 that this was over, served 2 terms and never got it done? Is this egg on his face, and is this a huge accomplishment for Joe Biden, or is he just kind of piggybacking off of Donald Trump?
That's an interesting question. Obama is almost like, his presidency is almost like this empty space. And it's like America was just kind of on pause. Of course, when we came out of pause, it's like we took a nap. And when we woke up from the nap, we all hated each other. That's essentially what it was like. But not just a heck of a lot happened there. I mean, we had the subprime crisis that was going to happen anyway. We could have solved it better. I mean, I guess there was cash for clunkers. I mean, there's not a whole lot there. Yeah. So this idea that there would be egg on his face is, I guess it's dependent on the idea that he was consequential. And I'm not trying to be trite here, but except to the extent that he eroded America's ideological foundations and really helped birth probably a new level of hatred for police, or a level not seen since the 70s. Yeah. Other than that, I mean, there's just not that much there. So, I mean, what did he have to be proud of in the first place? I don't know. If there's egg on Obama's face, I think most of it was probably heaped there by Trump, and this is just the last little. And maybe the idea of Biden changing the date a little bit is just kind of his way of kind of putting his stamp on it and saying, look, well, I'm the one who really decided when we got out of there, and who cares as long as lives aren't on the line? Yes. But lives are on the line. And I just can't help, I keep seeing Martin Short in there saying, oh, but Mr. President, the people will love it. The people will love it.
It alarms me that Joe Biden is potentially putting lives on the line simply for a PR stunt.
But does it surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me. No, it doesn't. It seems just like Joe Biden. It seems like the
Very
left.
Predictable.
It seems like the left. It's predictable, but it's alarming. It's disturbing. I don't. Who wants a president that does that? We're willing to put American lives on the line just so we can do what looks best. I think probably the reason Biden's doing this is the Trump thing. I really think that he is trying. I bet you there's some element of concern here that, what if Trump comes back in 2024 and Joe Biden is in fact running? If he can say, I got troops out, I ended it, Trump couldn't do it, that's an effective campaign strategy. So maybe there's an aspect here where Biden's lining himself up for a future run. Now, I don't know if he'll be able to handle that.
Propping
but
himself up.
It does seem like this is aimed directly at Donald Trump. That's what I think.
It's good. That's good. Good discussion, fellas. Anything else?
I'm good. That was great.
No?
I think
All
they've
right.
heard enough of us.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. We are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. It is our pleasure to get to visit with you those 3 times a week and bring the news to you and hopefully some good discussion. If you like what you see here, be sure to check us out online at westernjournal.com. You'll find the stories that we talked about and much, much, much more, way more coverage of the news. And as we were saying in here, it's coverage from a Christian conservative perspective. We're unapologetic for that, and we're proud of it. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to click subscribe. After you click subscribe, you're going to have the opportunity to click a little bitty bell off to the side. Click that bell. That's going to make sure that you get informed every time we go live, so you won't miss us from here on out. And also, if you feel inclined to support the Western Journal in ways other than simply reading our content, we love it when you read our content, but if you want to do more than that to support us, go to westernjournal.com/join. There are several different options there that you can get involved with that help support the work that we are doing, the writing we're doing, the reporting we're doing, the commentary we're producing, where we are really trying to help hold America together and help bring it back to its biblical roots. So if you feel like you should, if you feel like God's moving on your heart to support us in ways other than just reading, go over there and check that out. That's it for us today. We are going to see you Friday. We can't wait until then. Take care and have a good evening.
Josh, did you hear? They're putting the Libertarian back on the podcast.
No.
Oh? You didn't see the calendar?
No.
You should talk to Kayla about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, who's on the show Tuesday?
You and Joe.
Yeah. Like he's back.
Yeah, no, you and Joe.
The
You should
Libertarian?
Yeah, Libertarian Joe.
He's not back.
You should just go in the studio and check it out.
You're messing with me.
Okay.
Okay. Nice joke, Kayla. Got me to go to the studio.